Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Today we're going to talk about a subject that's really been on my mind for a while. It's been on everyone's mind, I'm sure. If you live in the West and grew up here, you're going to find this interesting. And we're going to talk about music and Islam. Now, we're going to talk about some of the past history of it. We're going to talk about some of possibly the consensus of what Muslims believe about music. And I'm going to give you some of the things I learned from the education that I had in Islam with Bill Phillips and his view onto it, which is very short. I mean, it's not like it's going to be really revolutionary and it's going to change and rock your world. If you've been a Muslim any length of time, and if you've come to this country from another country, you know what I'm talking about. You can't escape music. You can go in the malls, you go shopping, some stores play music. All of this is just piped into your head throughout your shopping experience. We're going to talk about, is music haram? Is it makruh? Should we listen to it? Should we practice it? Should we play some music? We're going to get into all those things in this video. So hang on, grab your chairs, get you a cup of coffee, and we'll get started. When I talk about music, and I think about my studies, of course I only have a diploma from IOU, and that's Bill Phillips' school. It's about 1 year. It took about 1 year. That wasn't really hitting it hard, but you could probably do it in less time than that. But I wanted to learn something, so that's why I took my time. I went over things. But he was a guitarist. I don't know if you know that, but he related in one of his videos that he was a guitarist at one time. And so you're talking, somebody teaching that knows a great deal about music. Me, on the other hand, I'm not musically inclined. I don't play music, never have, never will. But I do know something about it, and I know what the Islamic rulings are about music. So I'm going to give those to you today. You see these videos all over the internet. Shabir Ali's got one. Zakir Naik has got another one. Various sheikhs and scholars have videos on music. So here we go. Bill Phillips said that music is regulated, that it's not forbidden. Now I'm going to read that. I'm going to say that again because that shocked a lot of people right there. That music is regulated and not forbidden. When I say that, and I've said it before, I've shocked some people into almost a nervous breakdown because I just couldn't believe it. I'm off the beaten trail. I'm practicing error. I'm teaching error. But if you listen carefully and you listen to this video, I think you're going to see what he means by that. And I sort of go along with that view that he has, that music is regulated but not forbidden. Now we'll first start by the Quran. There's no ayah in the Quran. There's no verse that's going to say that music is strictly forbidden. We come up with these rulings by going to the Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, and I'll give you some of those verses, and I'll give you what the Prophet, how he addressed music, so you'll better understand it. The Christian, on the other hand, and we're talking about Muslims, but the Christians, on the other hand, do not have such a ruling. I mean, there's nothing in the New Testament or the Old Testament that negates the practice or use of musical instruments or singing or anything else. In fact, they like it, they enjoy it. I remember when I was a Baptist minister, and we know that music, number one, changes your mood. You can play music and we see that because of David. 1 Samuel 13 and verse 14, uh, you know, uh, Saul, the King Saul, which, he's kind of like, oh, I don't know if he's mentally ill or if he has some mental issues or something, but when he would go off and get crazy, and he's did that many times, he did it one time and threw a chunk of spear at David, tried to kill him. So David had plenty of opportunities to kill him and get rid of him. In fact, there's this one story where he cuts the back out of his robe in the cave while he's using the restroom. I thought that was a funny one. There's some humor in that. But when David would harp, he would play a harp. Saul would immediately calm down and would be done with his fit of anger or whatever it was that he got. I don't know. I don't think it's listed what he actually had. But he would get into rages from time to time, and the music would calm him. It was like a medicine to him. So that's what Christians are going to tell you. Well, music is good. It's a medicine. They use it in their praise and their worship services. And from what I've seen, and from being in those praise and worship services, it uplifts you, and it gives you this euphoria. You get happy, and that's a good thing. See, they say that's a good thing to be happy. Baptists usually do it in their service in the morning. You'll have your announcements, and you'll have some prayer, and then they'll have some music. They'll sing some hymns, and everybody will stand up. And when you stand up, you got access to your wallet, and the idea is to get you happy, get you standing, so you got better access to your wallet, and then to get as much out of that person as you can, because the music is helping do that. See, not giving from the heart. They're all ecstatic and they're happy, and this is the best time to take up a collection, you see. Better to do that than when they're arguing and fighting, right? So take up that collection in the morning when they're all happy, they're all standing, they all got access to their wallet. Almost every church I've been in, except some charismatic churches, you'll still be seated there, and they'll push the basket down the aisle. It's usually a bucket, and they'll push it down the aisle for you to throw your dollar, or if you got real happy, you might even throw $10 in there, and that's the plan. Okay, we'll get off the subject there a little bit, but that's pretty much what I witnessed, and you may not like that if you're a Christian, but I'll tell you what, that if you watch, that's what goes on in your Sunday morning service. Now, okay, so we see that the prophet, peace be upon him, was in one of the Sahih, and it's I got a book here. I don't know if you I looked over it. I don't know if if you'll be able to see it. But it's a book on what's lawful, what's prohibited. The writer, I can't really pronounce his name, so I'm not even going to give that an attempt. But Yusuf al-Kuwardi, maybe that's it. Okay, you got to forgive me because I'm English speaking. That's my native language, and that is hard for me to pronounce. But I hope I got it right. Yusuf al-Kuwardi. That's who wrote this. Was a scholar. I think he was a scholar. He came from Al-Azhar in Egypt, one of the premier schools, Islamic schools. Yeah, I disagree with some of the things that he says in there because he uses a soft approach, about the same kind of approach that Shabir Ali uses. And Shabir knows he's in the West. He's not in India. He's not in Pakistan. He's not in Saudi. He's not in Dubai. He doesn't give the hard line on music like it would be forbidden, because he knows a lot of his people, a lot of the people that attend his mosque are American. Maybe they're reverts. And then there's a lot of Muslims that grew up here, were born here, and they don't share the same view as mom and dad. You'll see that when I looked at this study, there's a breakdown between, preteens and teenagers up to the age of probably about 35, I think it was 35. They have a softer approach and a softer view. To them, music might be makruh, and some music might be haram, but mostly makruh, and they listen to it. From that age on up to about 65, it's haram, and that's what we've been seeing. So if you got young people, and they've been born in this country, they've been subjected to music all their lives. I don't think I ever had a car in my life that didn't have a radio into it. Now, they're not listening to talk shows on these radios. They turn these radios on and listen to music. And that's what they're designed for. And some of them have some real powerful speakers. If you don't go down to the highway, you don't go around parking lots. And I used to live on the beach in Alabama. And kids would go up and down the beach, and they would have these speakers blasting. I mean, boom, 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 boom. Their heads must be vibrating inside those cars, and and they liked it. It was kind of like the rap music was kind of like a poetry, a modern type of poetry. So just keep that in mind when we go through some of these things, because there's evidence from the Hadith that when I said like Bill L. Phillips had said that music was regulated and not forbidden, what we're talking about here is the case where a couple of young girls were beating on a duff. Now a duff is like a little drum. If you don't know what a duff is, it's like a little drum. And they were pounding on this drum, and they were singing some type of song, maybe like a ballad of some kind, I'm thinking it was, or poetry of something. And the Prophet heard it and never said anything about it. Said that's okay, they can do that. So, but at another time, the Prophet was laying down resting, and a couple of girls again. Once again, it's always a couple of girls, but these two girls, I guess they must have went around and they were playing all the time. Excuse me. But anyway, they were playing and beating on a duff. A duff. Now, not a guitar, not a synthesizer, not a woodwind instrument, not a harp. This was a duff, a little drum, and they were beating on that and they were singing. And Abu Bakr came by and said, "You girls, stop it. You can't do that." And the Prophet said, "Leave them alone. Leave them alone. Let them play." So these are two hadiths where the Prophet said, "You can go ahead and play that drum, that duff, and it's permitted." He could easily said, "Look, that's not permitted. You can't have no music at all, no singing, no music, no beating that duff." But this is what we mean by regulated. It's regulated in the fact that these two girls could do this up until the age of puberty, and after that, when they started to become young ladies, they couldn't be singing in public to men, and that's the Islamic ruling on that. No woman is to sing in the presence of men. Now, it may be considered to be what do we call it today in the West? We call it maybe a turn-on. There's something about a woman's voice that would excite a man, get him upset, riled up. So that would not be permitted. Yet, how many times today do we see women singers? I'm thinking when I was into music, wow, a long time before I got into Islam, there was a singer, Dolly Parton, and I used to listen to some of the country, and she had this sweetest voice, and I can see how this would pan out, how this adds up, So these are two little girls. These are beating a duff, and at one point, Aisha married off one of her, I think it was her niece, and the Prophet said, "Now these are Ancilla. Why don't you send a singer over there? Did you sing? Did you send a singer over there?" He's asking, and so song was permitted. Okay, now song is melodious. It has a melody to it, and this falls into the same category almost. Okay, so if you look in Bukhari, volume 7, 5590, it gives this type of practice in the same context with intoxicants. And we know that intoxicants are not something that we're supposed to be using, right? Okay, even Baptists, even as a Baptist, we said no drinking, all right? Did people drink? Yeah, they did. Did people drink intoxicants in Arabia? Yeah, they did, and then it was banned. So this was abrogated later on, where intoxicants were not permitted. Okay, I want to get that point across because they're not permitted. So it says in that verse, it says that making lawful things that are unlawful. I'm not going to read the whole verse in the Quran, I mean in the Hadith to you. You can look at it for yourself. Almost every Muslim has Bukhari and has Muslim. I have those two sets, and I think everybody does. But you can look in there. Now in Bukhari volume 5, 4001, it's again these two small girls playing the duff. So you can look there for a reference to what I'm telling you. And you can go to Bukhari volume 2, 987, and that was the one I gave you about the Prophet laying down and Abu Bakr saying you can't play that music, and he said just leave him alone. So I think in Muslim history, the consensus is that music was haram. Okay. Most Muslim countries, Muslim states around the world, music is haram. You can play that duff. Now, when I say Muslim, Sufis are Muslim, okay? They have the same Quran, belief in the Prophet, but they have this practice. If you watch some of the movies, I think you can get some on TV, National Geographic, or there was some other documentary that was produced that they would talk about the Sufis. It was on, I think this documentary was on Iran, and you would see these Sufis, and they would swirl around and around. They're doing something like that, playing music and getting like in a trance, and you see the effects of that. It's not always a positive thing. This is the way they practice their faith. This is the way they practice Islam, and this is on one end of the spectrum, and the Sufis are on one end, and Sunni Muslims are on the other, and there are some groups that are probably in between. But take into consideration that when you say Islam, you're not addressing all Muslims. When you say Sunni, because there's some other ones. There's Ahmadi, there's Sufi, and I don't know. There's a bunch of other groups as well, smaller, minor fractions that deviated for various reasons. As far-fetched as some of those reasons are, we're not going to get into these because this is not the video today. But anyway, we're talking about music. I'm talking it from a Sunni perspective, and music would not be forbidden but would be regulated. And I gave you the examples of the regulation. The two small girls, not adult women, and a duff. Not electric guitars, not synthesizers, not speakers that'll blast your mind right out of your head. Just a small duff, like a tambourine. I think that duff was like a tambourine. I'm not exactly sure, but somebody will probably make a comment on that. But not a really big piece of musical instrument, like a harp. I'm thinking a harp is like what David was playing was more like the prehistoric piano. I think they both are on a sort of same principle where the strings are plucked and a piano, the string is hit with a hammer. So they're pretty much related. So harp and a piano are pretty much related. These things would not be these would not be permitted. Sorry to say. I grew up in America. I listened to music most of my life. I felt the enthusiasm, the energy from music. I also want to give you some of the negative things about music because I remember listening to music way back when, and there would be a beat, a certain musical beat, and that beat would get into your head, and it would be over and over and over. The beat was with some lyric, and you wouldn't be able to get that out of your head. I mean, you would just listen to it over and over. And even when you turned it off, you could hear that, and you're thinking about that, the beat and everything. It kind of like it just got in there and made its home right in your mind. Something wrong with that, right? Anything that's controlling you like that, something wrong with that. As a Muslim, we don't believe in excess. And that's excess in worship as well. But we don't believe in excess. Moderation is the key. So it would be against Islam for that fact alone right there, in moderation, because you get this thing in your head and you want to play this thing over and over. I bought songs years ago when I was a kid on those old cassettes, and before that, 8-track. Believe it, that's how old I am. 8-track. And those were the big cartridges, they were monstrous, and you pushed them in your player. And we'd play the same song over and over and over and over and over. And by the time we got to school in the car, this was going on in your head, and you were hearing that over and over and over. It's got an effect to it, and anyone can understand that. David played because what? It affected Saul. In a positive way, it calmed him down, but it could also affect people in a negative way as well. Now, whether David did that or not, whether he played music or not, I don't know. I know he was a prophet, and I'm kind of wondering, and I haven't investigated from the Islamic point of view on David with his music playing. But I'm going to do a video on David because David was a prophet. He's also a king. He's also quoted as being a man after God's own heart. All right? Did you hear what I said right there? David was a man after God's own heart. And you'll see that in, that's another verse, 1 Samuel 13 and 14, you'll see that verse there in New King James Version, and you'll also see it in Acts 13 and 22, where he's quoted by God. It's God talking, that he's, in Acts, that he's a man after his own heart. So, would a man after God's own heart be plucking away on a musical instrument and playing it? This is the question. Now, you answer it. I'm not going to answer that for you, but I gave you the two verses. I give you in the Old Testament, and I give you a verse in the New Testament on he's a man after God's own heart. So you figure it out, okay? This is not an easy subject. This is a debated subject, and people are on both sides of the fence with it. I think I go along more with Bill L. Phillips that it's regulated. It's regulated to small children, regulated in the sense that as long as it doesn't, long as they're not singing anything that's haram, as long as they're not singing anything that would lead individuals away from Islam. There is a verse in the Quran, I'm not going to get to that verse, but there's a verse in there where they were singing poetry and they were trying to mock the Quran and lead people away from Quran, and that's forbidden. So we know that certain things, if it affects the community, is forbidden. Well, I don't know what else I can add to this. There's probably a lot more. I just wanted to give you some fundamentals about music. The ruling about music is that music would be haram. You know, you couldn't listen to AC/DC running around in a rubber suit with devil horns. That would be absolutely haram. And I didn't throw in, but I'll throw it in, and you can go in the Bible and look up the reference. You can Google it about the Satan was a musician, would play music. His voice was like an organ. That's what the Bible says about it. So you go ahead and check it out. Am I going to get hooked up with something like that again? No, I don't think so. There's no way. They could say that it's makruh and I still wouldn't want anything to do with it. Does it lead to intoxicants and things like that? Music is mostly played in taverns, in bars in the United States. So you figure it out. And at music concerts, there's a lot of drug use, a lot of drinking. And if music was so good, the musicians, the rock musicians today, wouldn't they be benefiting from it instead of being, committing suicide, using tons of drugs, blowing all their money on cocaine and all these other things, and indulging in a life that's not beneficial to themselves or anyone else? Would this be something that music should benefit them? If they're playing it, it's a beneficial thing. Well, it should benefit them. So you think about these things I told you, and if you're a young person, you think hard about them, because I got all this gray on my face, and I've been around a while, and I know what you're thinking and where you're at. I've been young too at one point in my life. So you make the decision, and I pray, inshallah, that you make the decision according to Allah's word and according to His Prophet, peace be upon him, and the hadith that's quoted. Okay, so we finished another video. It's been a while since I uploaded one, and I hope you enjoy this one. If you do, like and subscribe, but also do something else. I'm going to ask you to do something else, and that's to share it on your Facebook. Share this video on your Facebook. It'll go around everywhere. People that you don't even know will be watching it. So go ahead and share it. Assalamu alaikum, and you have a good week. This is Monday, and you have a good week, and may Allah richly bless you and protect you and keep you until we meet again. Salams.